go to Europe to grab a guest, I can get people who are 5 generations into a business. And what very typically happens there is they're going to say, Galen, my son, I love you. I want you to start running this roofing company, but you have to leave. And so Galen leaves and goes and works at, let's just say, Starbucks. What I need you to do is go to Starbucks and work hard there and get up to the level of, I'll just say, district manager. When you get to the level of being a district manager at Starbucks, you can come back as lateral as we can. But now you've got that info. How does Starbucks do inventory control? How does Starbucks do negotiations? How does Starbucks do scheduling? All those things, you bring that information back into the company. That's one part of effective succession planning, is you can't keep your kids in the company forever.
From humble beginnings, Insurance Claim HQ has grown to one of the largest property casualty firms in the country. We didn't do it alone, and you shouldn't either. Every week, we're talking to claims professionals and top experts from all over, all to help you grow your business and make you stronger. Let's level up together. I'm Galen Hare. Welcome to the Level Up Claims Podcast.
Most contracting businesses don't make it to the next generation. Not because the kids don't care, but because the business just isn't set up to survive without the founder. No systems, no succession plan, no clear roles. And years of hard work disappear when it's time to step away. But what if you could build a business that runs without you and thrives long after you're gone? Today's guest is a seasoned business coach, contractor, mentor, and host of the Profit Toolbelt podcast. He's helped trades professionals all over North America transform their companies into scalable, sellable businesses. And he's here to walk us through how to pass your business on to the next generation without losing your legacy in the process. Please welcome Dominic Rubino. Dominic, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, Galen, great to be with you.
So look, before we jump into today's topic, let's start with you. So you're a business coach, a podcast host, a bad fly fisherman, as I understand. Really bad, I guess. So a man of some talents and a few non-talents. But what drove you to where you are now?
Yes, I often wonder the same thing. I don't know. I didn't grow up at a business kitchen table. You know, I grew up at a kitchen table where my dad was a welder. My mom manufactured red tape, which means she worked for the city building department. So I know everybody now is laughing. You're like, she made red tape?
I was thinking about it. I was like, how do you do that?
Yeah, well, she did it. Yeah. When anybody who stands at the building department for licenses and permits knows what I mean there. But I remember being a kid and literally looking up at one of my uncles, understanding that he had a company and he was a framer. And I was like, I don't know any of those words, but he's the coolest uncle in the world. Well, I ended up working for him as a framer. And, you know, I'm in the Pacific Northwest. And the joke up here is when you're a framer up here, you're very clean because it's always raining. And so when you're holding up an outside wall, the water's coming in my left sleeve and it's going out of my right boot. Out of my right leg. So you're just constantly being rinsed. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's part of how I got started.
No, I think it's good. And I think it's important to kind of know that background because as you know, it's become so common over the last 3 to 5 years that everyone's a coach, but not everyone kind of had any real life experience, right?
Yeah. So if I may, I've been a business coach. I've been a business coach since before the two words went together. So I certainly wasn't the first in it, but I started in the year 2000.
Oh, wow.
Turn of the century.
Yeah.
And when I started to introduce myself as a business coach, people gave me that blank stare. It would be like calling myself an apple wrench. Like I know what an apple is and I know what a wrench is, but I have no idea what an apple wrench is.
Fair.
So, you know, if you follow the sort of the arc of that story, that was, I had left corporate. I was working for Sprint, the phone company. And I was a business coach there. They call it like an inside consultant helping our low voltage electricians. So I was helping the trades there. And then I became a business coach. I bought a franchise. I learned how to be a business coach. And then I started and sold a couple of my own businesses using the stuff that I learned because it works. And so from there, I built a company. It relatively large. I built it to 120 million in sales, and then I sold that. And then I bought another company after that, and I built that to 230 plus locations around the world, sold that, and then decided I didn't want to travel anymore. So I started a podcast like everybody else.
Also, podcasts came out of freaking nowhere, man. I mean, what they started in 2004, 2005. Like they just suddenly
now,
appeared on your iPod, and everyone's like, I don't know if I'm going to use these. And today, everyone listens to them.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But I think about this a lot because you mentioned starting, growing, selling. And it's definitely a topic that comes up a lot. We actually don't handle it a lot. I'm really excited for our topic today because I think my listeners are a little bit different than so many industries. A lot of business people I run into, that's the hustle, right? Buy, grow, sell, buy, grow, sell, buy, grow, sell, buy, grow, sell, eventually get tired of it or make so much money on the sale that you're out. And then those people are friggin' addicted, right?
That's the dream. Yeah.
And then they're
usually
addicted.
Buy, grow, what?
They make so much money in an exit. And then they're like, I'm right back in. They can't, it's like gambling. They cannot stop. They're like complete addicts. Yeah, everyone.
Me, Yeah.
Everyone. It's so hard to get that big payday and walk away.
Yeah. A lot of people dream about it, but just stay in that business and never do anything and then wonder why eventually they sell a pickup truck and some hand tools and never realize that dream. And we deal a lot with that. We deal with the very cream on the top of that because people recognize, I need to pass this business on to my kids or sell it to my employees or sell it in the market.
And that's kind of the perfect transition. So I get this sense that a lot of our listeners, because many of them I know personally, they really are trying to build something for their kids' future, for an employee that's maybe younger than them that they want to hand it off to one day. And I thought this was just such like an amazing opportunity because one of the things that caught me that you've said is like most contracting businesses do not survive past the first generation.
Right.
Why is that?
I wish we had the answer because it's not a simple answer. First of all, the people that go into construction have an incredible work ethic, regardless of what direction they take it in. They've decided to put their body on the line at risk every day to go and build a business. And if they get hurt, that's, they're going to have to change what they do or start to add some people, etc. But you get to a point in your business where you realize I can't do this anymore. My ankles, my knees, my back, my legs, something isn't going to last. And you know that. But they also look at their kids and they want to provide something for their kids. So there's a lot of interests. No, let me say this differently. There's a lot of weight on the shoulders of a business owner in contracting. They've got promises they've made to their clients. They've got promises they made to their employees. And why is it third on the list, the promises they made to their family? The people that have recognized, I got to match all those are the ones that contact us. Gotcha. Or somebody like us, right?
No, that makes sense. And it is priority, and I think so many businesses are just not like organized in a way that is clean. Like I'm very close with a big roofing company worth millions. I mean, they do an ungodly sum of money every year, right? And the owner is kind of getting to an age where he's thinking about not working anymore, right? So he looks to his son who has been in this world forever, like since he was a child. And the son is still in this world for that company. Yeah. Wants to be there, but looks at the business and, in confidence, which is why I'm not giving any names, says, I don't know if I want to deal with this fucking mess. Like, I don't know if I want this company.
Well, that situation happens a lot too. We're deep into another side topic here, but in that particular case, that son is just really good at being the vice president / son of a roofing company. If they sell that business, could that son go to another roofing company and be a VP automatically?
Who knows?
Probably not.
Yeah.
Probably not. And I'm not being impolite. It's just the case. That's why business owners that really think about legacy, that's it. Who has it really a lot more clear in their mind? And this is going to sound sexist, and I'm going to say it anyway. A business owner in construction who's got daughters. He's like, I want to leave the girls something, but they don't want to be in construction. That was the extent of me being sexist. I'm not very good at it. So, but those guys want to build a legacy. So they're like, okay, well, I have to build this business so that either we sell it or we sell it to the employees, or we grow it to the point where we're pulling cash out and putting it into investments, typically real estate, so that one day the rest of the family can run a real estate portfolio that happens to have been funded by my roofing company, electrical company, cabinet making shop, whatever it is. But if you've got some sons, you're like, well, they're going to take it over. Well, maybe not. And so I often find that dads with a bunch of daughters are the first ones to say, you know what, we got to think about something different here.
So let's kind of stay on that topic then. Like, It sounds like there's a few things. First of all, you got to have for succession planning, which is what we're talking about. When I, as a lawyer, hear that, that just means like, oh, make sure you have a will and make sure you have this. And some of that, I'm sure. But what are like the key components? So if you're talking to a contractor right now, they walk in, they're sitting here at a table with us, and they say, what should I be starting to do now if I want to build my construction or my public adjusting firm, if I want to build that to be able to hand it off to my kids?
Right. And actually, it's interesting you asked that question. It doesn't matter what business they're in. If you're a public adjuster, if you're a contractor, if you are a dentist, it's the same thing. We need to download everything from your head onto a piece of paper. And I'll say paper, but there's software that does this. But if we don't have that single piece of paper that becomes our boss, then we're never sure about what direction we're really heading in. It's, in contracting, we're very used to seeing plans and drawings and elevations. It's the same thing. We just need it for our business. And that takes out the uncertainty about what we're trying to do. Because it happens, right? You get pulled off, you get a bad client or a job's gone crazy. And so for a few weeks, you're off in the weeds and you realize, hey, I got to get back to center. You forgot what center is unless you've got that piece of paper.
Makes sense. Okay, so step one, get it all down. Whether it's
get it all
paper,
out of your head,
computer, or whatever.
Paper. Yeah. And there's formats for that. There's well-known, well-established formats, especially for contracting, that help you, this literally answer this question in this box, answer this question in this box. Now, if I get sick as the owner, I can hand it to my daughter, my son, my foreman, my plant manager, and say, just follow the boxes.
That makes sense. What about, okay, so let's kind of move to, I guess, a meatier topic then. Like, obviously, there's lots to talk about in terms of like legally, like asset transfers, things like that. I guess probably a boring topic for a podcast, but...
Well, it's not one that I'm a specialist in. I'd ask you those, but we're going to ask you when you're on my show.
Yeah, I'd probably dodge them as much as I could, but I would answer them on your show, I suppose.
A lot of disclaimers.
Yeah, so many disclaimers. I'll send them all to you in advance. But let's talk about like training that next generation. So we got it on paper, but I feel like that's not enough, right? That's a good backup plan, but we want the next generation to be successful. So like what kind of things do we need to do so they can start to make that shift, so when we're ready to step back, they can really take over?
Yeah. So Galen, good question, because it's really about professionalizing the business. And there's a lot of aspects to that. And there's various things that are going on in businesses out there. The first thing to understand is in contracting and construction, there's a lot of family business, probably just as much as in restaurants, but we don't business coach restaurants, so I don't worry about them very much. But you've got a son or a daughter who's working in your company and has always been in your company, like your friend, the roofer. And what happens is it gets kind of incestuous. Let's just use that son in that roofing company. He's never worked outside of the business to bring new ideas in. And so what happens is it's just a continual loop. That's the way we've always done things. There's no other way to do it. You're not getting those fresh ideas, even on how to run a meeting, how to project manage something, how to problem solve, how to do commercial bids versus residential, how to do residential bids versus commercial. If your kids aren't learning from outside, then you're doing a disservice to the future of the business. On my show, we try to get multi-generational businesses as much as possible as guests. The challenge with that is that in North America, 2 generations is great. But when I go to Europe to grab a guest, I can get people who are 5 generations into a business. And what very typically happens there is they're going to say, Galen, my son, I love you. I want you to start running this roofing company, but you have to leave. And so Galen leaves and goes and works at, let's just say, Starbucks. What I need you to do is go to Starbucks and work hard there and get up to the level of, I don't know, I'll just say district manager. When you get to the level of being a district manager at Starbucks, you can come back as lateral as we can. But now you've got that info. How does Starbucks do inventory control? How does Starbucks do negotiations? How does Starbucks do scheduling? All those things, and you bring that information back into the company. That's one part of effective succession planning, is you can't keep your kids in the company forever.
So you're not even necessarily suggesting sending like your future to a competitor. You're just suggesting they go and get business experience somewhere else.
Yeah. Doesn't have to be Starbucks. Send them to Dunkin' if you want. Dunkin' Donuts, right? It doesn't. My point is go find some new information, because we need that new info in the company. Now, in a lot of cases, the people listening, their son or daughter's already working in the company. So how are they going to do that? They're not going to send them away when they're already 35. That becomes a lot more difficult. And so the strategic planning process, which is when I said put everything on paper, becomes really important. I can give people a book recommendation, and it's not my book. A book called Traction by Gino Wickman. And you can use that book if you're under, I'll say $15 million. Over $15 million, you want to look at Scaling Up by Vern Harnish. Both of those books are excellent. They just have a different entry point into the market. And I've used both of those two books on my own companies. So I've not only done it myself and sold the companies, but we also walk other companies through how to put it in place. I would say for most people, Traction by Gino Wickman is a great model to follow.
No, that's super helpful. And we've actually had, for those of you listening, we've actually had a couple of guests recommend Traction. So I think this is your sign that you should definitely get it if you haven't yet. All right. So we've gotten them out and back in, or we've really put down our process on paper. What's kind of the next, but at some point we have to step back, right? And do we want that step back to be the time where we literally are like sick, or do we want to start planning that step back earlier?
Yeah, you want to start planning that step back much earlier. And for a moment, I want everybody to think about the market they're in, which is easy. It's the city or the county or the state, the country even that they're in. Think about one of your competitors. And you don't know how he or she does it, but they run 4 companies. They've got people banging on their door to work there. When the media needs a really good news story, they call them. When awards are being given out, they're asked to be the one on stage giving out the award. We all have those companies in our market. How do they do that? Well, they don't do it by accident. They do it by having a plan, and they work the plan. And so you need to put those systems in place in the beginning. And again, I'm going to come back to the key. If you imagine a business is a body, a human body, the strategic plan would be the skull and the spine and part of a hip. There's other tools that have to go on there for sure, but the foundation has to be having a solid strategic plan that everybody then works towards. When you've got that, you as an owner can step back from the business. You don't have to leave the business, but you can step back. And we've got processes we put in place, like dashboards, where we can track the key numbers. We've got SOPs, which in our industry stands for Standard Operating Procedures, SOPs, the way we do it here, what our systems. But you've got those things running the business, not you, just on the strength of your own will and conviction.
And y'all, what Dominic's saying is not wrong. Dashboards are so important. We haven't really talked about those on the podcast, but when I walk into my office every day on a TV on the wall, how many cases are open, what phases those cases are in, which cases we flagged as potential problems, and then I can click. It's an actual touch TV, and I can see the list of cases that are problems. I can see what those changes are from yesterday to today.
How much time does that save your business? Right? That one, it sounds simple. I'm sure it was hard to put in place, but I'll ask you, would you ever get rid of that?
Never.
Right. That's the value. Imagine a business owner saying, well, I can never take a vacation. We can never go to the Bahamas or Hawaii because I can't step away from the business. Well, when you have a dashboard in place, you can absolutely step away from the business. One of the little tricks that we put in a dashboard, a little different than yours because we're in contracting, would be a red, yellow, and green coloring on the cells of an Excel spreadsheet. Well, green means everything's good. You can just ignore that one. Yellow means we should probably start to pay attention. And guess what we do when we see red? We chase it. That's the thing to go fix. But once you fix that, you make a few phone calls back to the office, you close your laptop, and right back to staring at your feet on the beach.
There you go. But it's so important. And so I think there's 2 points to like stepping back, right? First, you have to get your person ready to take over. And then B, you have to get your team ready for that person to take over.
Yeah.
So how do you approach each of those?
You're going to hate this answer, but it depends.
Okay.
It depends on so many things, right? So do we have the right person in place? When I talked earlier about professionalizing the business, do you have an organizational chart? Just a picture on a piece of paper that says, this is how our company is structured. And by the way, you don't have to have a fancy one. You can just take a blank piece of paper and draw an oval on it. And the oval should take up almost the whole piece of paper. That oval is your boardroom table. I want you to put yourself at the head of the boardroom table and then draw your key people around it as if they're sitting at your table. That's a basic organizational chart that you can start to get your head wrapped around about how we're going to need to grow that table or change that table. When you want to get fancy, you can move to an organizational. This is business coach language, Galen. This is the stuff people fall asleep at. That's why I said, just do it as a boardroom table. But it's so important. If I can't communicate my ideas to the rest of my team, then I'm always going to be the bottleneck, always. And that's why we keep saying, get things on paper, get it written, get something as a plan that everybody can look at and disagree with. I'm okay if they disagree with it. We're still talking about it. And then when I get their input, I've got their buy-in.
That makes sense. And then, there's also, I guess, a third one I hadn't really thought about is if you're a marketer, if you advertise a lot, there's also getting the public ready for the transition, right? And,
Right.
An example I have, and then I'm curious what your thoughts are, there was a law firm in Ohio, big marketing firm, lots of TV commercials, lots of billboards. Guy realized he wasn't going to do this forever. He'd identified an attorney that had been with him for a while, but was significantly younger for 5 years. 5 years. You can't make this up. They did joint commercials and joint billboards. They made sure their faces were on all the billboards, both of them. And they were both in every commercial because he wanted a 5-year exit.
Right.
And he knew if he left one day and someone else appeared in the commercials and the billboards under the same name, they would lose market share.
Right.
So what other kind of things would you suggest doing to the public to get them ready for a transition?
Well, before we get the public ready for the transition, the owner has to be ready for the transition. Because if the owner has the hero complex, every question has to come to me. I'm the holder of all the answers. It's never going to happen. So I've got to start to delegate to the people on my team. And by the way, when you follow the strategic plan, it lists what we need to do in 10 years, in 3 years, then down to 1 year, and then every quarter, which is 3 months, as we know. But in those 3-month blocks, it's not just you as the owner doing it. You're assigning something to your project manager, something to your estimator, and you're putting people through their paces so you can see who should be taking over the business. And if you've got a contender in the business, then we can start to let, for instance, our customers know, especially for commercial contractors, they might do a lot through 1 or 2 big GCs. I'll leave that alone for a second because you can't do all your business through a small number. But let's just say you've got 1 or 2 big general contractors who do the bulk of your business. It's hard for you to exit stage left and slide somebody else in there without them knowing it. But we can do it strategically, just like you said. You have to think about it in advance.
Yeah. And sometimes it takes longer than you realize, I guess, is what I'm saying. Is I've seen so many companies where some guy decides he's going to retire or step back, and there's like a 30-day transition to the public, to the big customers. Whereas, why didn't you, if it was going to be your son, you obviously knew you had your son many years ago. You probably decided you wanted him to take over several years ago. And so why wasn't your son starting to attend those meetings with that big customer with you? Why wasn't your son sitting at that table with you? Why wasn't sometimes he on the same text chain, that way when you finally did say, hey, I'm going to step back, but I'll still be here for you guys, they were very comfortable talking to your son.
That's, part of the tools to do that is the strategic plan and is the dashboard and a number of other tools we just simply don't have time to get into here. But for instance, take your son, he's going to have some accountabilities in the company. He's responsible for producing. And when I know he can do those because he's hitting his numbers, then I can take him to lunch with that big GC. He can be the project manager or the accountant that's in charge of things and starting to have those conversations. So it doesn't look as crazy when I start to step back.
For sure.
People don't like uncertainty. And they've got their choice with contractors. They can send that business to somebody else, as they often do. We just have to make sure that we seem very stable the whole time.
One of the things that it occurs to me is kind of a problem. You talked a little bit about how to identify someone in your company that might be a good person to take over in terms of delegating. But how do you figure out if they're the right person at all to take over?
I think inherently, first of all, we talked about that organizational chart or the boardroom table. You need to have roles and responsibilities then for each of those positions. So your project manager does what a project manager would do in most other companies. So let's say that's your daughter, your son, doesn't matter. Are they fulfilling that role as best they can? And do you think that your son or daughter has the chops to be the person leading the company? I want to add, though, they might do it differently than you. Doesn't mean it's wrong if they don't have the same style. It's just, do they want to do it, and can they do it? And you have to give them that trial independence like you did as a kid. You got to put them on the bike and let them go down the cul-de-sac. It's kind of the same thing in the business. But that's why we have checks and balances in place. We've got dashboards. We've got SOPs. We have effective meetings. We're communicating properly in the company. We've got a strategic plan. If they're always running off into the weeds and not following the plan, then we have a problem. If they're trying to implement the plan and the plan's not working, that's a totally different thing. But that's actually where some outside perspective, and I think Galen, both you and I provide that in different ways, but you probably also need some outside perspective to assist with that.
So it sounds like one of the things like you're pushing, I guess, and I tend to agree, is like, while you're coming up with this plan, it's not enough to keep it internal. Like, it sounds like you really should come to someone and say, hey, Dominic, I'm thinking about retiring and I have 2 sons and 1 daughter and 16 employees that have been with me for 20 years. Help me figure this out.
Yeah, it's great to have that outside perspective. However you have it. There's lots of ways to get people to look from the outside, but I don't see my own blind spots, right? I don't see them in my business, and you probably don't see them in yours. So having somebody somehow who has a perspective that's different, maybe that brings more of a CEO level perspective to your business, yeah, it's great. When you bought your kid their first car, did you buy them the cheapest, worst car they could? Now, they might have bought their own version of the cheapest, worst car, but you and your wife were probably freaking out. But it's the same thing when you give your kid a car. You want it to be safe. You want it to have airbags, good brakes, solid steering, decent gas mileage. Same thing with the business. You don't want to give your kid a broken jalopy, dangerous wreck of a vehicle, and they don't want to take it.
Every once in a while, Dominic, I have a moment on the podcast where I realize how messed up my childhood really was,
What kind of car did your parents give you? The old farm truck?
That was not safe. It actually caught fire.
Yeah, I had a vehicle. My painting van got, what do you call it when the police put yellow tape around the van?
Oof, cordoned off? I don't know. It was a crime scene?
Yeah, there's a saying. Yeah, no, it wasn't a crime scene. It was a road hazard. And I got pulled over for something. And the cop started reading from this special section. He's like, this vehicle is now,
it got impounded.
Anyways, so they put yellow tape. Impound. Yeah, it was such a dangerous, but I was a painter, I was trying to not making money, working hard. The same story that too many business owners have,
so definitely don't give your kids a business that needs to be impounded. That would be bad. And then I guess as we kind of come to the end of our time, but I think it's relevant. As I said, a lot of our listeners, I think, want to pass their business on, but maybe that's not true for everyone.
Right.
So I think what you're saying is if you follow the right steps, you put in that strategic plan, you identify whether you identify whether you even have people that are capable of taking over the business. You get that outside consultant. If you decide ultimately you're not going to pass the business on to someone, then you have other options, right?
When you do it on purpose, you have choice. When you don't think about it, when you don't think about the future, you're left with no choice. And you probably have friends like this who didn't date very much and ended up in a bad marriage. In the absence of choices, you're forced to make a bad decision because you just don't have a lot of options. But when when you're proactive about growing the business and thinking about what you want it to be in the future, you've got choices and you can choose where it wants to go instead of the world pushing you around. I don't want to see somebody sell a pickup truck with some hand tools or some machinery at the end of the day. That's not the value they worked so hard for. They came home late for dinner. They didn't take their family on vacation. The family is always the one that suffers the most. Clients and employees come first. Well, at some point that gets tiring. What about me? What about the owner? What about my family? What about me going to Hawaii or wherever you want to go? What about my kids? And so you have to be intentional about it. It doesn't just happen by accident. It's not magic. It just takes disciplined work.
I could not agree more. Dominic, you've been amazing. You've been super generous with your time. I can't let you go yet, though. Before you go, I have to ask you one question. What does it mean to you to level up?
Always moving forward. That's what it means. Always move forward.
I love that. Thank you so much for joining us, Dominic.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I'd like to thank Dominic Rubino for joining us on the podcast. It's so interesting when you think about it because succession planning is so much more than just finances. It's long-term viability. And I think the point he made is so important. Our family suffers first when we grow and build a business. So don't you owe it to them at least to see if you can set it up in a way that will benefit them long after you're gone? Follow us on Apple, Spotify, or your favorite podcast player.